Good evening, good evening. It's very nice to see you, and I welcome you once again to another program of the Michael J. Colligan History Project, this time in cooperation with Miami Hamilton Downtown. This series, the Heritage Stories of the Miami Valley, is part of a 2-year theme focusing on our history in this community and in this region. And I hope you will join us next fall for programs about the future, the past and the future of the arts in Hamilton and in this region. And then in the spring, a semester of programs about the importance of the Great Miami River to this community from many perspectives. And so I hope you'll look for those announcements. Now this evening, I'm a life member of CHAPS. Many of you know what CHAPS is about. And so I can tell you from personal experience that one of the great citizens of Hamilton, Ohio, will be interviewed here this evening. And I'm now pleased to turn over the microphone to Sean Higgins, who will introduce her, and we will have our program with Antenan.
Very good. Thank you. As Doctor was saying, we are going to talk more of Hamilton history tonight. We've got a wonderful woman who actually I have a little bit of personal history with. When I first moved to town, my wife and I rented part of a duplex from Ann. And if I can, although you're not renting anymore, but if I could give a plug, she's a great landlady. We didn't put that in a resume, but she is a great landlady. So. And through the years, fortunate to be able to get a little bit of history of Ann and what she's done, and just recently learned some more things. Ann, welcome, and thank you for being here this evening. There's a lot that people may not realize. Of course, your close friends may know some of your history, a lot of close friends here. You're not originally from Hamilton, although you represent a lot of Hamilton in your life. We're originally from Virginia.
Yes.
And how did you end up in Hamilton?
I went to work for Dave Maxfield, an architect in Oxford, and my husband came in to bid a job, and he had to deal with me to get the drawings and pay for them and all that. So then he got the job. He bid it kind of low, but he got the job, and when he came up to check the job, he'd come and check me. So when we finished the job, we got married. He thought we better not get married until we finish the job. They might get mad at him.
One job at a time.
Yes. Yes.
Well, let's go back a little bit further. How did you end up in Ohio? Your family moved to Ohio. Where did you move to?
Cincinnati.
Okay.
And I can never remember the name of the company, but they had the radio program, The Shadow.
The Shadow News.
Remember The Shadow? Well, Daddy got a job with them, and we moved here from Virginia.
Huh.
And
So you grew up around the Cincinnati area.
I was 15.
Okay.
Depends on when you talk about growing up.
And one of the first things that I find remarkable about your life, not that you went to UC, but how you got through UC and ended up graduating. You had a love of art.
Well, when I got out of high school, I didn't think I could do anything but draw or paint. I had nothing else to offer for a job. And the dean of the high school asked me what I was going to do, and I said I didn't know. She said, well, you're going to college. And she arranged for me to get expenses paid to go to college, and I got a scholarship every year. I never paid 1 cent of tuition until I graduated, and then I paid for my freshman tuition. But I had 5 years of college, 4 on scholarship.
Fantastic. That's, again, early on, showing some interesting things. But in college, you, as you said, you draw, paint, you love drawing and painting, so you studied art?
Yes. The head of the architecture department lost his department. All the men went to war. The Second World War started when I started college. And so he had to find somebody to teach, and he started teaching the art students. And he was teaching us how to do drafting, and he got bored. So he started giving us design projects. And then one day he asked me to come in his office And he said, would you be interested in changing to architecture? You're a good designer. Well, you know, somebody tells you you're good, you say, oh, thanks.
Sure, I'll do that.
So I changed. It was quite a job. I had to make up for 2 years of math that I hadn't had.
And this
go to
was
night school and day school and
Night
rode the
school?
streetcar to school.
And this is interesting because this is a time again where women were not thought of in that field.
There'd been one woman who graduated before me, and she did her co-op work in the Near East in archaeology. I don't know how many years she went to school. It was a 5-year program, and I did it in 5 years.
After switching majors,
Yes.
you did it, still did it in 5 years.
And I
for
kept
5
up
years.
my art classes too.
So you started out from art, thinking again, now again, putting things in perspective at this time, the men were off to war,
Yes.
women did not pursue careers in architecture. You were thinking of art. You were thinking of what, teaching or?
I didn't know.
So the opportunity came and you obviously
Just said, okay, let's.
went after it.
Yeah.
And so you were one of the first.
I was the second woman to graduate, but the first one to go straight through.
So
and
the
my
first,
senior year, all of the men came home from war. And I was a 20-year-old, tall, skinny. The teacher would say, can't you make yourself look a little older? These guys were married, they had kids, they'd been gone to the war for years. I sat in the far back corner so nobody could get behind me.
so the first female to literally go through the 5-year course and graduate with a degree in architecture from the University of Cincinnati.
And I was the only one in my class.
A class of one.
Class of one.
Are you having a reunion this year? So first in line, you graduated. Now you're a female with a degree in architecture. The world is wide open. What do you do?
Well, I'd lived at home while I went to school. And I don't know whether Mother thought it was good to get me out of the house for a while or whether she just thought it was time for me to be on my own. But she showed me an ad for Procter & Gamble. And it was market research. And you traveled all over the country and interviewed people. So I'm usually on that scene. But I applied for the job and got it and traveled for 2 years. And at the end of 2 years, I felt I had to get back in architecture. And that's when I found the job with Dave Maxfield. It was a time like now when there wasn't much work, but he was doing schools and churches and he was busy. Most architects were looking for work, but he was busy. So I went to work for him.
And how did that happen? I mean, again, not a lot of work going on for architecture, although, again, as you said, he was able to find jobs to bid, and not a lot of females in the field. Did you run up against any issues?
No.
No?
One thing that has bothered me is all of the schools where I did drawings and they built them have been torn down because they're old and had to be replaced.
They're not?
Makes you feel good.
Well, you know, that you look around and so many things go that way. I look at my house, say, really, what, you know. So as we're getting back to the story of where you met Jay.
Yes.
So now, again, this is an architecture firm in Oxford. So now you've traveled for 2 years. You're now living in Oxford, working for an architect, designing schools, buildings, and this engineer comes in with designs or looking for design. What was your first thought of him?
Well, I thought he was pretty good looking.
So you work on the project, and after the project, you get married. So again, we have an engineer, we have an architect. Now what? Again, the world is wide open.
We tried to find a place to live, and Jay couldn't get any realtor to show him property. And he finally said, "Why won't you show us any property?" He said, "You're a builder, she's a designer, you won't like anything we show you." So we built a house. We built a one-bedroom house. And then 3 additions later, We moved to Berkeley Square.
3 additions.
Yes.
Who are the additions?
Well, the additions were to the house.
Right. All right.
But I have 2 children.
Right.
Susan, who's now in California, and Jay Jr., who's in Florida.
Now, you built a 1-bedroom house, and what was your work then?
I worked at Baldwin Lima Hamilton as a draftsman.
And that's just what they called them at then.
Yes.
Just what they called them. And then but you spent some time at home too.
Oh, yeah.
At one point you were actually a housewife.
Oh, for years. I was a stay-at-home mom.
So when the job with as a draftsman, was that before or after that you raised your family?
Before.
Before. So
Once I had children, I didn't do anything like that till they were grown and gone.
So you can do it. You've done it all. You can do both.
Yeah.
Now, along the way, the kids have grown, and you're a stay-at-home mom. Now what do you do?
Well, we had a city manager here who wanted to get German Village area listed in the National Register. And he tried to find somebody who was an architect who would serve on this committee. And they wouldn't do it because then they couldn't do any work in German Village if they were on that committee. So then he heard about this stay-at-home mom with an architecture degree, and he put me on the committee. And then he got fired because he was using city employees to fix his house. And before he left, he called me up and he said, "Would you please run for city council?" I'd never thought about politics. I said, sure. So I ran for council, got elected.
Let's say I can be a stay-at-home mom, I can get an architecture degree. Sure. Why not?
Right.
So you ran for council, and how many years were you on council?
6.
6
It
years.
was 3 terms of 2 years. And that was before they changed the way of electing people.
Right.
It was 7 people got elected. The one with the most votes was the mayor. The second votes was vice mayor, and the rest were on council. And the second time I ran, I was second. And one day, we got sworn in January, and we were walking up the steps of the council meeting. And I looked at Frank Witt, and I thought, for a 42-year-old kid, you've got deep lines in your face. And he turned to me about that time, and he says, "Annie, I feel like hell. I just hope I make this." 10 minutes into the meeting, his head hit the table, and he was dead. He had had several mild heart attacks, but this was a serious one. It just took. I had to finish the meeting because we were on deadlines for money and stuff. The law director told somebody, write the minutes as if it was legal.
It literally,
So,
it literally
apparently-
falls to you immediately
Yes.
in the middle of a meeting.
Yes.
So how did they do that? Were you literally
Well, we
sworn?
waited till rigor mortis set in, and then, then we finished the meeting.
So were you sworn in right there at the meeting?
No,
Okay.
no, the weeks went by, and the men kept coming in and saying, "You're not qualified to be the mayor. We need a man for mayor." And finally, after about 3 weeks, I called the city manager, and I said, "When do I get sworn in?" So he did it.
Now, you were the first woman mayor of Hamilton. Have there been
Still
any?
the only one.
I was going to say, have there been any since? Fantastic. Impressive.
One has run for mayor, but she didn't get elected. I told her at least she's the first woman to run for mayor. I was pleased with that.
That's true. That's true. That's true. So you served 1 term as mayor.
Yes.
Did you ran a second term?
Well, the second term I was vice mayor, became mayor, and then the third term I didn't get reelected mayor. They needed a man for mayor. So being back on council was kind of boring after being the mayor. So I decided that I would find something else to do.
Because you haven't done enough yet.
No. So I started a construction company. When I was the mayor, I traveled to meetings all over the country. They have these meetings to help you keep your brain screwed on, right? So I went to these meetings, and for the first time in my life, I became aware of historic preservation. I'd grown up in Virginia, but I'd never thought about it. And in architecture, everything was modern, you know. So anyway, I became aware, and when I didn't get reelected, I thought, well, what can I do? My husband was a contractor, and I have a degree in architecture. Let's do a construction company. So I started a company to try to save old buildings. And I thought if I could do it and they could see what I'm talking about, maybe they'd get interested in
More
historic
people
preservation.
would get on board
Yes.
with preservation.
Because until then, they just, I don't know, I couldn't seem to get through to anybody just talking to them. So,
Now, again, you're a construction company in historic preservation. So was your focus to restore old buildings or refurbish old buildings or find old buildings? What were you trying to achieve?
I call myself Antenan Restoration, wrong name. Restoring means you take it back exactly the way it was. And when I did a house, I put in electricity and bathrooms and kitchens and furnaces and all that. So I wasn't restoring, you know.
Right.
But you had to make the house livable.
Right.
But
You had to get up to code.
yes,
Some of the properties that you would refurbish, were they, the townhouse that I lived in or the duplex that I lived
Yes.
in? So were you, at that time, looking at houses? Were you looking at apartments? Were you working with larger buildings? What were you trying to tackle?
whatever somebody brought to me.
Okay.
When I first started, the first 2 buildings I did, I had a party and introduced everybody to come and see what I'd done. And that was the only advertising I did. I'd have
Where-
people come and see the building.
Are these buildings still here?
Yeah.
Which buildings were they?
Well, one of them was a building out in New Miami. It was a Houston house that Jay and Dan bought. They bought the farm. And the house had a roof that was leaking and had no plumbing, no electricity, no heat, nothing like that. One of the interesting things was the house had flooded during the 1913 flood, got water in the basement. So we put a furnace that was horizontal, that was attached to the ceiling joist,
Up on the ceiling in the
Yeah.
basement is the furnace.
so it wouldn't get wet. And somebody lived there. When they moved out, they took the furnace with them.
As a landlady, I'm sure you've run into situations like that.
But never a furnace before.
But never a furnace. So how was the reaction? Again, as you talked about, a couple buildings that you invited people to, had a party, and said, this is my idea. This is what we want to preserve historic buildings. What was the reaction? What built from there?
Well, I feel like people really began to understand, and we've certainly come a long way. I mean, you look across the street,
Right.
but there was one over there that was torn down and a little modern one put in. I've never liked that little one. You know?
Some of the buildings that, and we're going to get into some of the other things that you've done, but while we're talking about specific
Yeah.
buildings, some of the other buildings that you were able to save and the stories behind them.
Well, the Anthony Wayne Hotel, God, I can't remember his name, the best architectural designing firm in the country, was a New York firm, designed that. And the bank owned it because the hotel had gone bankrupt.
Okay.
So the bank owned it. And the president here in Hamilton was told he had to get rid of it by the end of the year.
The president of the bank.
Yes.
Okay.
And on November 30th, someone from the Journal News called me up and said, did you know the Anthony Wayne is going to be torn down by the end of the year? I said, no. So at that time, I was president of the Historic Preservation Committee in Columbus and president of CHAPS here in Hamilton. So I was able to bring in people from the state and from the county. And I kept working with this president. I didn't know how much he wanted to save it.
He did want to
He
save it.
really wanted to
Okay.
save it. He did not want it to go down. But Jay's first cousin was going to pay for the demolition and put a park on the site and name it after his parents.
Oh, so now we've got family involved.
So that was interesting, yes. But we were able to save it. It took us 4 years to get a developer.
Now let me
And
back up.
the bank paid every expense that we had in those 4 years.
He obviously did want to save it. Now you
He
had,
really
as
wanted
you
to
mentioned,
save it.
you got a phone call on the 30th of November, and it was going to be torn down at the end of the year. So you're looking at 32 days thereabouts
That's right.
to save this building. Let me play devil's advocate.
We say,
Obviously, you love old buildings. Why that building? What's so special about that building?
well, it's a beautiful building. Its location on the river is a very obvious place. It's a wonderful building sitting there. You know, if it's hiding in the middle of a block or something, it's very different, but that was a very obvious building right there at the bridge. And it was wonderful to save it.
And you mentioned the architecture, or I'm sorry,
I wish I could remember his name right now, but I can't.
the hotel, the people, the designers, you said were from New York.
Yes.
So this is one of the top, obviously,
Yes. But
firms in the country.
unfortunately, they finished building the hotel just as the big depression hit. And they never were really successful with the hotel. But it's now apartments, and it's not for rich people, and it's not for poor people.
But it's
It's
being
for
used.
people who can pay their rent, and they have nice apartments. It is a wonderful building.
Very good. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Other buildings that you've been able to save, preserve, or at least get some action going on?
Well, the Elijah Morgan House in Fairfield, it was a Ross farm, and the city bought the farm. And they tore down the barn and all the outbuildings, and they were going to tear down the house. And a committee decided that the house shouldn't be torn down. And they called me to come to a meeting. And I got there, and they were telling me how school kids were going to come in, kids learning to be contractors or carpenters, were going to come in and replace the windows and doors and, and bring it up to date.
Modernize it.
Oh, yes. And I said, don't let them on the site. And I brought an architect from Cincinnati, and we got grants to save the building, restore it, furnish it, everything. And they're very proud of it in Fairfield now.
Wonderful. So restore as opposed to refurbish. So you get a lot of phone calls from people.
Yes.
We'll call Ann. See if we.
Yes.
Do you have a chance to, obviously with Anthony Wayne, not a lot of time, but are you able to do some of the history and be able to document history of some of the buildings in the area?
Well, I think we did that. We got grants to get German Village listed in the National Register, and we got grants to go out and look at Fairfield and Liberty Township, and I don't know, some of the different townships to find out what was there that was valuable that needed to be protected. We did a lot of that.
Very good. Now let's go back to a little bit of your story.
Right.
You've let's talk about CHAPS. Tell us what CHAPS is and how it came about.
Well, it's Citizens for Historic and Preservation Services. There was, if you drive down High Street and you're going west, there's a monument centered on High Street.
Right.
If you drove east, there was this hill, and there was a beautiful building sitting on the hill, centered on High Street. It was the old county home for poor folks. Well, the county commissioners wanted to tear it down, and I didn't want it torn down. Somebody came to me and told me that they were going to tear it down.
What era is this? A year?
This would probably be in the 80s.
Okay.
I started my company in the 80s. So here they're going to tear this beautiful building down. It's a frame building, but it was just beautiful up there. And we, again, brought my friend from Cincinnati up, who was a big preservation architect, and we tried to talk to the county commissioners. They wanted it down. Well, it eventually caught fire. And only the owner of a building can check how a building gets caught fire. And they never checked it. But while it was burning, the fire chief took me through the part that wasn't burning. I toured it.
Huh.
But people across the county were so angry at losing the county home. See, they built a new one. When the old county home was built, if you lived in the county home, you did farming, you did cooking, cleaning, laundry. Everybody had a job. The new law is you couldn't have a job. It was against the law to have to do any work. And they had this new modern building they moved into, so get rid of the old one. So.
So the Chaps started, or the organization began as a result of that, or how did?
So that people who were angry could get together in chaps and start doing something to save buildings. So that's how.
There we go.
I was the president.
Use all that energy for something
I was the
positive.
president the first 20 years.
Does that mean you were the angriest?
I guess. Yeah, and my office was the office for chaps, and as of March 31st, it stopped being chaps' office.
You just recently moved out.
Yeah.
After 28,
30 years.
30 years.
28 years of chaps, 30 years in the office.
Antenan restoration for so many years. What are some of the other other buildings that you were involved with the restoration company?
Well, there are some that I put additions on that I'm very proud of. John Reister had bought a 3-car garage with the upstairs for a chauffeur to live in. Only when he bought it, it had been changed into a house where 2 of the garage doors were now bay windows, and the middle garage door was the entrance.
Okay.
Okay, so he got married. His wife got pregnant. Here he is living in this garage. So I ended up putting 2 additions, one on each end of it. The first one was 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a 2-car garage. And the second addition I put on was a living room, a master bedroom, a walk-in closet, a big bathroom, and a basement. They'd never had a basement.
Interesting. So what was initially essentially a garage with the doors and a living space for the chauffeur has now become kind of a large house.
Well, another house that I'm very proud of was the Bob Wessel house. They had me come in. They wanted the house to be fixed up so that they could have a living room, a bedroom, and a bathroom on the front of the house, and somebody could live in the rest of it and take care of them.
Oh.
Well, Bob just died in his 90s, and Helen's there alone, and they've never had to have somebody come in and take care of them yet. But I had fixed it so that they could have somebody do it. Yes, that was what they wanted. Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the things you've done along the way as well. We have you're part of other organizations,
Yeah.
both as a volunteer
That I
and
was
a
so
leader.
surprised to find that.
Give a little explanation of this. This is from the General Assembly of the State of Ohio, from the Ohio Senate, honoring Ann Antenan for outstanding achievement. Explain what this is for.
You know as much as I do. I got that in the mail. I started looking for things to talk about. What have I done? And I found that. I was very surprised. I didn't remember it at all.
Well, then let me read a
These are-
little bit of it anyway.
These
Well,
are all papers for who's whose. I didn't remember any of those either.
128th General Assembly of Ohio pleased to extend special recognition to Ann Antenan on being presented with the Humanitarian of the Year award by Lifespan. This in June of 2009. And this is the
This is
award
nice.
itself.
Yes.
How did that come about?
I don't know. I just got it, and then I went on the board for a while.
You're on the board, okay. But some of the other, you've worked at the Y, you've taught both in church, you've taught at the Y, you've taught art, so many things.
Oh, I have a story about art that I'm just so excited about. I was teaching art at the Y, and the woman who was the director at that time was not like the director now. She didn't like my class. She was sure that my oil painting people were going to ruin the YWCA building, and she just hassled me all the time. They had me teach one class for children, and I wouldn't do it again because there were so many kids. We had to be in 2 rooms plus a restroom, and it made me nervous that I couldn't be with all the kids.
Yeah. You couldn't do that now.
No, there was a young man named Denny Jones who lived next door to me, and he was in the class, and he was the star of the class. He was so outstanding. It was wonderful. He spent his whole life as an artist, retired recently. He told me that he had never done anything in art or paid any attention to art until he was in my class. I could not believe
And he
that.
spent his entire life as an artist and made a living at it.
It started out of my one little class at the YWCA. I couldn't believe that.
It's interesting how we talk about how those little things, those thin threads, are just a touch of, you touch someone's life, and what seems to be just a small menial thing.
Yeah, he was so pleased to tell me that recently, and I was really surprised.
Some of the other awards along the way.
Oh, God. Well, this one was, what was this one? 2020 Commission.
And you've served on a lot of committees.
Yeah, a lot of my awards are at the museum right now.
The garden association, the garden club.
No.
Yeah,
I've done different roles. I've been in the garden club,
You were
gosh,
president?
over 50 years. Yeah. I was civic beautification chairman when they were talking about putting houses in Miami Woods. And we fought that, and we didn't want houses in Miami Woods. We wanted it to stay a park.
In Miami Woods.
Yeah. And now that same garden club is working with the city and doing gardening on both ends of the bridge, and it's so different from when we were fighting with the city.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's come through. Well, along those lines, Northern Kentucky, you did some work in Northern Kentucky.
That was really something. My husband and I worked with the Institute of Cultural Affairs, which is an international corporation. It works all over the world, and they do what they can to help people. And I think they were the first people in India to give small loans to women so that women could start businesses. And I know that's going on in India now. But what we did, we had town meeting in every county in the United States in 1976. And I did them all the way as far west as Oklahoma. But I did one, I was a workshop leader in Covington, and we had to say Covington and Northern Kentucky. Okay. So I was the workshop leader, and I felt like every important man in the city was in my workshop.
Now, they were having these town meetings all over the country for this, and so
The other workshops I felt like had the women and children, and I had all these city officials and stuff. And I tried my best to do a good town meeting with them. And I went home and I cried. I felt like I had not gotten through to them. I had not done what I was supposed to do. So a year later, 1977, this guy shows up in Dave Maxfield's office and said, "Oh, you were our workshop leader." And I thought, oh my God. And he said, "Have you seen what's happened in Kentucky?" And I said, "No." He said, "All that development along the river." He said, "We got so excited about your meeting that we had another meeting and kept on meeting trying to figure out how do we do something." And they ended up developing the Northern Kentucky along the river.
Along the river. You see,
I couldn't believe it.
as we talked about, being able to just start a spark.
Yeah,
Maybe
I had
start a
no
spark.
idea. Had no idea.
You also were awarded the Woman of the Year in 2001.
At the YW.
Yes. That, again, for your work with restoration, preservation, you work with the city, you work with the community, your work with the Y, CHAPS. Now, you said you ran...
At the time, I thought they were recognizing people they thought were going to die because I just had a stroke. The person the year after me had had cancer, but then the next year it was a young person who was healthy. So
This is why I love getting together and talking with you, Ann. Now, again, the 28 years of CHAPS, you just relinquished the office space.
yes.
How is CHAPS continuing? What has CHAPS done in the last 28 years? And what do you see in the future for it?
What we have been doing recently that I've been excited about, I didn't think about it, was people after me who did it. But we started what we called a round table. And once a year we invite the historic preservation groups throughout Butler County to come. And the first year they reported on how they got founded and what they were doing. And each year since they've talked about what they're doing and what their hopes for the future are. And we want to get everybody working together so that we can be stronger when there's a problem. And we have something to save, that we don't just go out one at a time to save it, that all of us work together on it.
that, again, an interesting point of all of Butler County, because then you have, as you said, a unified front, and everybody's aware of what everybody else is dealing with, and
That's right.
there may be some things that could become a priority that other people can jump on board with.
Yes.
You talked about the schools you designed that aren't here anymore. They have the same thing up in Middletown. There are some schools being taken down there. I heard
we got ownership of the Carnegie Library, and we didn't have the facility or the money to take care of it, so we had somebody who was working with us, and the sheriff gave us 3 people every day for several months, and I can't remember how many dumpsters we filled. There'd been a woman's organization in there, and it was full of baby clothes and baby beds, and oh God, you can't imagine what was in there. We filled up all these dumpsters, and then these prisoners cleaned the building and primed the walls and repaired everything. We did not repair all the windows. The city's been mad at us about that. But we felt the building had to have some ventilation. You can't just close it up for years.
Right.
So anyway, he's got it, and we're hoping that he'll be able to sell it or restore it or do something with it. But we knew we didn't have the facilities to do it, but we saved it.
Right.
Yes.
Which is, I guess, is that your first priority, is to save it and give a reason why the building is worth saving?
Yeah. Well, it's like this hotel here. It took us 4 years to get it fixed.
A lot of other
but we
people,
saved it.
A lot of other people brought into making that happen.
Yeah.
What is your next project?
Oh dear.
What do you want to see next?
Well, the one I'm working on right now, you came to see it yesterday. It's called Opening Minds Through Art. And I am so impressed with that. I thought it would be a good program. They asked me if I could give them the money they needed for this program. So I called my banker, and she said I could do it. So I gave them the money for the first one. And Jim Mayer doesn't want anybody else to pay anything into it. He wants it to be my project. So anyway, this is the 3rd year. It's for people who have Alzheimer's or some other dementia, and they've completely given up on their life and on themselves. And you put them in this art class, and they do absolutely beautiful artwork, and they have their photograph and all kinds of things in an art show, and you cannot believe what it does to them and their family. Their family, I think, well, it's the people in the family just come up to me, just so thrilled to be a part of it.
And I am going to pass these around.
Yes.
This was I was able to stop by yesterday, and
Yes.
it was very interesting. It was very warm, and there were some wonderful pieces of work and wonderful quotes with a number of pieces of the art. Again, you're talking about someone who, as you said, is very alive, but maybe caught inside their body, and they're able to express themselves.
It's wonderful.
And find some joy. Again, opening minds through art, getting back to your art roots. I'm going to try
Yes.
to hand this off if I could without making a mess.
Yes,
You have
they were
one?
there last night.
Because you were there
Yes.
last night. And this is a project, again, that is going on in Hamilton specifically.
Yes, and what I didn't know until recently was that the Fit and Art Center is doing something with people with Alzheimer's. We haven't talked about the Fit and Art Center.
Here we go. We get the plug in now. Please.
Well, a group of us started meeting in my basement and eating dinner on the ping pong table and planning an art organization. And we wanted a place where we could meet and we could show things. And I've got a newspaper clipping someplace that says I had an art show and they had pictures of my artwork in it. But we wanted to have a place for artists. We just felt we needed it. We never dreamed that there would be anything like the Fit and Art Center right downtown instead of way out in the country someplace. And then the Carruthers addition to it is just gorgeous. To have that in Hamilton right here is just, I think it's awesome. And they have reached a point where they're doing music, art, dance, drama, you name it, any kind of art at all, they're doing it. And they're doing it all over the county and in this fabulous building here in Hamilton. The people, I don't know if the people in Hamilton realize how generous people in Hamilton have been. It's just unbelievable to me, the kind of generosity we have here.
And it is a gem. It is a gem
Yeah.
for our county, a gem for our
There
city.
he is.
I said gem, not Jim.
Oh,
Your involvement with art and architecture, again, as you look back, has become such a perfect marriage. It just makes so much sense. You
I've
hadn't
loved
planned on it, but it makes so much sense.
I loved it.
Very
Yes.
good. We're going to open up to questions, comments, stories. If anybody would like to share along the way, we have a microphone in the audience. I know you have a lot of friends here.
There's a neighbor of mine who has a question.
And your late husband always referred to you as Mrs. Antenan.
That's right. He never called me Ann. We were married 53 years.
Referred to you as Mrs. Antenan. What did he call you at home?
He didn't call me anything. I know something I wanted to tell you. When the Vietnam War was going on, he started fussing at me at breakfast as if I was sending the soldiers to Vietnam and I was running things. Every morning he'd fuss at me about Vietnam War. And I just decided I wasn't going to eat breakfast with him anymore. He could just fix his own breakfast. Then when I became the mayor of Hamilton, I got a letter from the president's staff in Washington saying it's 10 years since the Vietnam War was over. We have never done anything to recognize veterans. Please do something. So there were 2 Vietnam veterans working at City Hall, and I met with them, and we decided what we would do is we would interview 7 Vietnam veterans. And the Journal News would take their pictures, and for 7 days we would have an article and a picture. And the last day would be Memorial Day. And then they would be in the parade, and that night we would have a dinner to honor them. Well, they could not get it through their head that people were not mad at them. People were mad at the government for sending them there, not at them for going. So I did these interviews. They were in the paper. We had the parade, and they didn't know what was going to happen.
They're nervous about
They were
being
very nervous.
paraded down the middle of the street.
And people started applauding. And they went down High Street with tears just streaming down their face.
Wonderful.
And that night we had the dinner, and they were so thrilled. And one of the men who was there said, what we need to do is start a Vietnam Veterans Organization. And if anybody criticizes themselves or the war or anything like that, they have to put a quarter in the pot. And I don't know how many years that went on. I know that guy is dead now. But I run into these men or their wives, and they were so thrilled to be
Wonderful.
recognized like that. I just,
A positive reinforcement for them as human beings.
and when we moved out of my office, we could not find those articles. And Miami University had a replica of the Vietnam Veterans Wall
Right.
in Washington.
That's right.
And when they did that, I gave them copies of my articles, and they sent them to Washington. So I don't know, they're someplace in Washington.
Another moment you must be proud of, and again, another moment that touched someone.
Yes.
Those little
Yes.
things along the way.
Yes. Somebody told me that he woke up in the middle of the night standing by the hot water heater in the basement shooting it. He had heard a noise when he was asleep. And they had horrible stories like that. One woman called up and said, I don't want my article in the paper, but I have to talk to you. I have to talk to someone.
Just to get it
Yes.
out.
Yes.
To get it out. Very good.
So that was, I think, a very important thing that I did.
Very touching. Very touching. Other comments, questions, stories?
The reception last night at Berkeley for Ann's wonderful project of Oma was just fabulous. It was so
Isn't it wonderful?
outstanding. She should be so proud for what she has accomplished here in Hamilton with this group of people. The paintings were just gorgeous.
You can't believe them, can you?
Wonderful time, and we're just so proud of her.
Thank you.
Again, the comment that is accolades for the event last night, opening Minds Through Art.
That was wonderful.
It was a wonderful event. It was wonderful for the families as well. It was. I enjoyed. Again, it was my first introduction into OMA, and it was the artwork. I enjoyed. I enjoyed the artwork, but
yes.
more than that, it was the warmth that came out of the artists and the families and the volunteers. Enjoyed.
yes.
Get so much out of it
They
too.
have students who work with the artists, and they have the class is 10 weeks. And the student works with the artist all 10 weeks, the same student. So they create a wonderful bond. Yeah.
A bond that, again, expression can come out of.
There's a story that we told about the office furniture from the former office.
The office furniture.
Well, when I started my office, I bought antique office furniture. I wanted it to have the atmosphere of the kind of buildings I wanted to restore. Well, at the time that I had an accident and totaled my car, they also built an office at the museum. So I thought, well, instead of sitting there miserable through an auction, why don't I give it to the museum? So my antique furniture is at the Butler County Historic Society,
Wonderful.
and I'm very proud.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that
And
up.
there she is.
That was the comment I was going to make. I was going to thank Ann for her love of the Butler County Historical Society. Thank her for all of her wonderful furniture. And we also have the CHAPS files now from Ann.
Yes.
They will be preserved, and Ann will have a living legacy at the Historical Society. And as she knows, our big surprise to her was down in the basement of the Ritchie Auditorium. Now we have the Antenan office. And we have the drafting table and furniture from her office. We now have the Antenan office in the basement of the Ritchie Auditorium. We thank Ann for all of her love and all of her support.
Well, one of the things I couldn't figure what to do, I had this file where you put your architectural drawings in it. And I thought, I cannot throw those away. I just can't. What am I going to do with them? At Berkeley Square, there wasn't any place I could put that piece of furniture. They took the drafting table and the chair and that file, and they have some of my awards there too.
So you created an office, a working office. as
Yes.
well as a
And
church.
I was interested in your comments on the former B&O train station. I know I spoke to you several
Yes.
different times over the years, different events, concerts and so forth,
Yeah.
asking how you were doing with it. But I would have liked to have seen that either at a regular train station with trains stopping at.
That's what I would like.
in Hamilton, or perhaps even a museum of sorts. But I didn't know what was the obstacle in that. Was it money that they didn't want to?
Well, the railroad people say that the tracks are so close to the building that you can't do anything besides railroad stuff there. You can't have public there. I would love to see trains come through. When I traveled for P&G, it was before people started flying very much. Flying was kind of special. And I took trains all over the country. And I love traveling by trains, and I do not like airports, and I do not like airplanes. And trains, you can see what you're passing through, and I just love trains. I wish we could say something that I would love to see, something I think Hamilton really needs, and that is a museum to show off our industrial heritage. Hamilton has so many things in Hamilton so many things were invented here or first made here or improved here, and people here do not know the story. There's a man and his wife who are fixing up the James C. house right now, and I'm going to get to meet them and eat with them next week. But James C., when he died, there were articles all over the paper saying he'd never be forgotten. How many people had ever heard of James C.? I see one hand. She worked for me. There's another hand.
First telephones in Hamilton.
Yes. Before we had telephones, he strung a wire, copper wire, from his house to his office. But James C. was an engineer and a consultant. He worked all over the world. He put Hamilton on the map.
Worked with the Wright brothers.
Oh yeah, he worked at everything. and nobody's ever heard of him.
Well,
But somehow this couple found out about him, and they're fixing up his house, and I'm so excited.
that wasn't fair, because that was Jim Blunt that answered. He has an advantage over the rest of them.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, and he also worked with the Wright brothers, your comment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'd like to thank you for the YWCA on helping on the restoration of the building 2 blocks away that 42 women live in because you're rebuilding resort. There are paintings in the YW of yours.
Yes.
Did you know Robert McCloskey, the other famous artist from Hamilton?
I didn't, and when I took a cruise through Maine, I couldn't find his name mentioned any place, and I finally was in a store, and there was a picture that he had done, a print, and I bought it and brought it to the McCloskey Museum. But that was the only place I saw his name and name.
The way that you fortunately lives on, and we thank you very much for all the buildings that was spoken. Thank you very much, Ann.
Thank you.
Did you want to talk more about the Y and what you had done there?
Well, let's see, at the Y, I taught art for 12 years. I would have done it longer, but the director kept taking a bigger percentage of the profit every year. And she kept moving my class further away. I was down at I think the Y in Fairfield was the last place I taught. I was taught in the basement of a drugstore for a while. She didn't want me in the Y building.
I guess not.
So
Hello, Ian.
I'm there.
Why don't you talk a little bit about the High Main Street Bridge, because I know that you and Jay's efforts, Hamilton will not have one of the most unique and beautiful bridges in the state of Ohio.
I have boxes of papers on the High Main Street Bridge. Well, my husband wanted to save it, and the county, not the county, but I guess it was the highway department was going to pay most of the money. And so they thought, well, we can have it replaced without spending a lot of money. And my husband did not want it to go down. And he used to count traffic on the bridge. And then he made them come and check the strength of it. And we've met the man who did the actual work of doing those drills. He said, well, let's see, he was supposed to drill in 8 places to see how strong the bridge was. He drilled in 2 places, destroyed all his equipment, and would not drill anymore. It was so strong. So we did everything we could to try to keep the bridge from being torn down. Their plan was to put a $4 million bridge there. And Jay raised so much hell that we ended up getting a $20 million bridge. And people thank my husband for the new bridge.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's great.
Yes.
Sir.
Oh, yeah. I'm also one of the board members of CHATS, and so I've been to several board meetings. And when you mentioned Museum of Industrial History, you suggested possibly putting it in one of the old industrial buildings. I think you mentioned Niles School Works.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. As many of you know, Champion Mill and also Mohawk Paper Mill closed recently. The city's trying to decide what to use them for. I've seen examples in other cities in which old industrial buildings were converted to commercial use, including the Brooklyn Pottery in Cincinnati, the 2nd Street Market in Dayton, and also the Grove Cotton Warehouse in Savannah, Georgia. I do think converting the historic buildings into other uses should be something the city should be a driver of. Although it's possible may be cost prohibitive, there could be some environmental cleanup, but I do think that the city should be a driver of looking for uses of the historic buildings because our city is so rich in industrial history.
Well, I love the city of Hamilton. It's the only place I've ever stayed put in one place in my life. I went to 11 schools. But, people are critical of Hamilton, and they just don't appreciate what this city is like. And if we could get some of these stories out, when I was involved in politics, this city would not promote anything about the city. I couldn't understand it. I think our present city manager wants to promote Hamilton. He wants to bring people together, and he's really working on it. But when I was involved, there was none of that, and they had no interest in it. And it really bothered me because I thought there was so much here. Let's tell people about it, you know? Thank you.
It's interesting, bringing up the industrial. We've had a couple different, we've had a couple different
That's my
talks
daughter.
about,
You know, that's my daughter. I adopted her.
she's been with you a long time.
Yes.
The industrial side, we talked with Mr. Dave Ballou, talking about the Mecca paper. Talked with Charles Stinger, who was talking about the early days of radio that started here in Hamilton and around Butler County. So there is a lot to offer, and we appreciate, gentlemen, what you brought to this table as well over the past few months. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. I met Ann in 1985. She did a presentation about her first house, rehab, the Triber Road farmhouse. And I was so impressed and intrigued with what she was doing. I called her, I was still in college, and set up a job interview. I needed a co-op job. And unfortunately, she didn't have a place for me. And 2 years later, she called my mom, trying to find me, and interviewed again, and she hired me, and I worked for Ann for 10 years. And it's not just the architectural and preservation work that she did, but she inspired certainly me with all of her community efforts. And I remember thinking, she sits on every board. That she's so important in the community, and she does so much. And I always said I wanted to be Ann when I grew up. And I just want to thank her for being an inspiration.
She came to work for me before she was married. I went to her wedding, and she quit working just before her 4th child was born. She said she just couldn't handle it anymore. But she brought each one of them to work until they could walk. When they could walk, then they couldn't come to work anymore.
And I think when I was renting from Ann, I was bringing you checks, right? Okay, yeah. Once a month, I would stop by the office, and just one of those fun stories along the way. Again, early on when I first moved to Hamilton,
Yeah.
you were one of my first impressions, and again, the duplex that I lived in was one of my first impressions. So literally, when we started having kids and we're looking for a house to purchase, we would go look at houses, and we come back, we say, oh, this is not, I like this will work, this is great. We come back to this beautifully restored house that we were renting, duplex we were
It
living
was
in.
built by John Longfellow from the East Coast.
And nothing stacked up. It was a great house until we got back to this home that you had restored, and we thought, no, this is, you set the bar high. And we were fortunate to find a home that was over 100 years, it's been restored and so forth. So,
You've been in the same house all these years, haven't you?
and I have, the only 2 places I lived in Hamilton have been with one of yours and this beautiful old house we live in now. So you set the bar high and you set the standard for where the roots grow deep. So thank you.
I knew his wife before I knew him.
And that's and both of you have kept me straight the rest of the time.
Yes.
Anything else anybody would like to add?
I just wanted to say a little bit about German Village, because both Jay and Ann have served as president of German Village and have been trustees. And to me, the most exciting thing was when they have been involved, we had real democracy in progress. And by that I mean we would discuss things and everybody's ideas would go up on the ball, and then we would prioritize things, and it was just a wonderful process that they introduced to us, and I know they introduced to many people.
That was,
We have really fun things in German Village because of them. We have a motto, growing better with age. We have a flower, the red geranium. We have a song. We have a lot of special things because of them. And I remember when they were in charge of our cleanup days, oh my goodness, they would make maps and send teams out and have prizes for the most unusual trash collection. And it was just always really fun. And they knew how to get people really involved. So
that was our
on behalf
institute training.
on behalf of German Village, we just want taking people on tours, driving tours through the neighborhood. She knows us well. She got our roof on our carriage house. I could go on and on, but
Well, then you have to sing the song.
I can't. That would not go well.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate that. I think Dave, I can't tell if that's Dave back there, has a question or comment.
Have you ever had anything to do with the Frank Lloyd Wright home here in Hamilton
No, I haven't. Is there one here?
on Dick Avenue?
I didn't know that.
Okay, question of Frank Lloyd
I
Wright
did not
home
know that.
in Hamilton on Dick
I'll have to
Avenue.
go look for that.
Jim, are you aware of that? Does anybody?
Yes, somebody's must. Somebody.
We have someone who has some information.
Yes.
And Dave and Sue Saylor own that home, and a disciple or a student of Frank Lloyd Wright created that home, designed and built that home. And I don't know his name because that's not my background in architecture, but I'm sure you would know some of his more famous students.
Huh.
Thank you. I didn't know that.
There's a Prairie home on Dayton Street on 9th, or no, 8th and 9th Street, I think. It's a Prairie home.
Yeah.
But it's not a Frank Lloyd Wright.
It's again one of the students, but a
A lot of
Prairie
people
home.
call every Prairie home Frank Lloyd Wright.
Okay.
Can you say that?
Yeah. There is a Prairie style home on Dayton Street, I think at 8th, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
8th and 9th. And a lot of people call it Frank Lloyd Wright. It's a Prairie home, which is his style, but he did not design it. I don't know about that one.
I've been in his home where he lived, and I've been in Falling Water, several places.
Yes.
Yes. When I was in school, they didn't like Frank Lloyd Wright because he had girlfriends.
And another comment. Yes, sir.
Ah,
And when we close out our season at the Fitness Center on June 2nd this year with Michael Feinstein and Christine Eversole, we will have served about 55,000 people in 11 and 12. And I just wanted to thank you for having that meeting in your kitchen. That was in the late
it's the basement.
1960s.
Basement.
That's what you say.
Yes.
That was the meeting that got all this started. And on behalf of all our supporters and our members and our students and the faculty, staff, and board, I just want to say thank you for what you helped create here.
Yes. Dave Ballou was on that committee.
Thank both of you.
Somebody else.
And we do have. Does anybody remember the Phil Donahue show? Reminiscent here. Hang on, he's going to jump the crowd. Dr. Kurt Ellison, we appreciate getting everybody heard tonight.
Anne has said so many wonderful things, but I have to speak up for her role in the Hamilton Garden Club. For many, 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 many years, I guess about 40 years ago, I have two little things to tell. The first thing at the time I remember Anne, she was trying to teach us new young members of the garden club how to design flower arrangements for competition. Now Anne, I mean, this is a master, but she could do anything. So we would follow her around, and so we had all driven out to the fairgrounds. For every year, we took our stuff out there to have our flower arrangements judged, and we were so excited. You know, we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't, but she did. So one day, I remember, and she probably doesn't remember this at all. One day, I remember everybody got ribbons except Anne. And I was like, how could Anne not get a ribbon? And I remember your arrangement. I'm sure you don't. But it looked like a big apple. An apple bowl with apples and flowers, and it was beautiful. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry you didn't win a prize. And she said, oh, that's not the best thing. She said, the best thing is stumping the judges when they don't know what to do with their work.
I remember that now. Yes. My sister was a judge, and she told me that that's the best thing you can do is to stump the judges so they don't know how to judge you.
It's a whole new world to those of us who did never win ribbons. The second thing is, I was a recent city beautification chairman, walking in her footsteps with the Hamilton Garden Club. And we always have these work days, and we work hard, and we tend to the gardens across from the Anthony Lane Hotel. That's our job. We go once a month, and we dig and we think, you know who's there? You know who's there? Every time it's her turn to work?
And I'll be there. It's about a week, and we'll be out there again.
That's right, and I charge that day, you better be there.
Yes.
But she's a joy, and you just love her.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate.
You don't know how wonderful it is to look out and see all these people that I know and love. It's just incredible.
Is there someone else want to comment or question? Well, again, we'll have a gentleman up front here. I want to make sure everybody gets their
He was
their
in charge.
opportunity.
He was at City Hall when I was there.
And the only thing I can say is that when you were mayor and on council, ideas came up. Administration was against, and you persevered. I think that's what you should be on about. You persevered and got it.
You made me think of something. When I first got on council, I found out that the highest paid woman at City Hall made less money than the lowest paid man. And I worked on that until women got raises. They had to get new titles so they could get raises.
Very good. There's so many more things we could get into. I mean, we didn't
Oh,
talk
but we're
about the
taking a long time.
courthouse. I mean,
I
again,
was on that committee.
on that committee, and again, they were going to tear that down early on.
When I moved here, they were talking about tearing it down. They were talking about tearing down the YMCA then too.
So a lot of things involved,
Yeah.
but again, so much more we can get into. But we appreciate
I
a lot
think
of
it's been
folks
long
that-
enough.
How much time are you going to give us tonight? And thank you so much for sharing tonight, and also so much you've done for us.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you for asking me.
Stay right there. Stay right there. Now, let me remind us all that we're partners here with TV Hamilton, and we're very happy to be partners with TV Hamilton. And you can watch this event on TV Hamilton, just as you can see Dave Ballew's earlier interview and the one with Charlie Stinger recently. The Colligan History Project has a website. It's called colliganproject.org, and I hope you will go there, because not only are these interviews coming up on that website, but are the previous Colligan history programs as well. And if you go to the TV set, or if you go to the Colligan website, many of you will be able to see yourselves, because you were wonderful participants this evening. We all thank you so much for coming. Please join me once more in thanking Sean Higgins and Antenan.